You're listening to Ernestly Speaking, the only weekly podcast that covers friends, foes, and anything that goes. And now, for your badass host, Ernest Owens. And we're back for a special edition of Ernestly Speaking with your host, Ernest Owens, myself. Well, it is officially the election, the Philadelphia Democratic primary election is over, and the next mayor of Philadelphia will be Cherelle Parker. No, I'm not joking. Cherelle Parker is going to be the first woman in Philadelphia history to be mayor. The first Black woman to achieve this. The first Black person to be mayor of Philadelphia. It is Cherelle Parker. She won. She won. And a lot of people right now across this country is probably, well, across this country, but really across, Philadelphia was probably like, what the hell, right? Like, majority of Philadelphians actually voted is probably like, what the hell? How did this happen? Hey, I have the answer. I have the answers. There is a lot of things that happened tonight that put all of this in full circle. And earlier during election day on Tuesday, I did the special with none other than the big labor leader, Ryan Boyer, who really pushed Cherelle Parker heavily. He really, pushed her and put all his support. And a lot of people, underestimated her. I was one of the people that was not too sure, but when I did my ranking, I did place her at number 2, and I did put Dom at number 3 and Helen Gim at number 4. And I must say that, sidebar, anybody but Gim was where my energy was. Oh my gosh, thank God she lost. I'm just so happy she lost. I'm not enthusiastic or crazy about, of course, Cherelle Parker winning. It is what it is. I have thoughts. I'm going to express them. But oh my goodness, Helen Gim, look what happened. See, God don't like ugly. God don't like ugly. There's a lot of things to be said about this, but I want to talk about the overall results of the race and then give you my analysis about what's happening. So for the most part, it's been declared Cherelle Parker is in the lead. It looks like Rebecca Reinhardt is going to be number 2. The division between them was over 10% of the vote. Helen Gim came in at number 3. Alan Dom came in number 4. And Jeff Brown came in at number 5. It's obvious that the real race was between Rebecca and Helen, duked it out for second and third. For city council, all of the incumbents won. But the race between Cindy Bass and Seth was tight as hell. Super tight. Super tight. It could still be anyone's race. It's tight between Cindy Bass and Seth Anderson Oberman. It's a neck and neck race. It's 83% of the vote has been counted. It's as a time of which I'm doing this. Isaiah and Kathy is tight between them too. 80% of the votes have been counted. It's about a 12 percent between them. They can duke it out as of midnight. But right now, it's looking very much like it's very clear that Isaiah Thomas, Catherine Gilmer Richardson, and Rue Landau are going to make it. It's very clear that that's happening. Rue Landau is officially the first openly LGBTQIA candidate to win a city council seat. And she won a citywide race at large. She did it. Rue Landau did it, y'all. I'm super excited for her. She's the 3rd highest vote getter, and this is the first time she's ever ran for office. So I'm super excited for her. It's Nina Mott and Jim Harity are coming really close. But Aaron Santamore and Jimmy Harity, the percentage numbers could change with this 80% of the vote. It's still too close to call. But what it looks like is that Amanda Malcolm Murray is not going to win. She was the progressive candidate that, people really thought, had a fighting chance. When we look at the rest of the candidates, closer to the bottom and where people are at. It's some interesting candidates who just didn't, who like Donovan West had so many advertisements and buzz, but just couldn't pull it off. We're looking at other races. It looks like Supreme Court, Daniel McCaffrey is going to win. When we look at some of the Supreme Court to Superior Courts, Tamika Lane and Jill Beck are going to get in. I'm trying to look at these other seats that are up for grabs, but it's been an interesting night tonight, for sure, across the board. And I guess the big one for me right now is looking at Cherelle Parker. She pulled off a very big race. Rochelle Bilal and Michael Uttermeyer are still a little tight. Looks like Rochelle's going to pull it out, though. Looks like, that was a tighter race. Cherelle Rochelle Bilal and Michael Uttermeyer looks like Rochelle's going to pull it out, but it was a close race. Even the race for city controller was about a 10% split, but because other people was in the race, that took away. But it seemed like Christy Brady is going to hold her own and win that seat. Register Wills, Tracy Gordon, and John Sabatino are still going neck and neck. So we're going to still see how those numbers are going to pull. I'm looking at the other races. But a lot has been going on. I want to see some of the races that come out, but just want to stick on mayor right now real quick, but looking at everything else. So it's official. Cherelle Parker will be the first woman mayor. She won the primary. It's very likely that she'll win the mayor. It's a strong, Democratic, situation. Both or whatever. It's a lot going on, and that's something that I'm just, I'm just happy this race is over. I'm just really happy Helen Gim lost. I'm sorry, I can't even begin to start. I don't know how to process this. I'm just super excited. And yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot, but it's so much. So yeah, it's a lot to process. But what happened? Kind of like the way that Hillary wrote her book after the end of 2016. She did a book called What Happened? Let me explain what happened. What happened is a lot of things that we don't talk enough about in politics. And I think we sleep on this. Some people are saying the woke is broke, which is a mess. But there is something to be said for who won and why they won. And we need to unpack this, people. Progressives, liberals, we got to unpack this. So I'm going to start from the very beginning. When I first started covering the race, I said in the early ages that based on the political climate that we were facing, Philadelphia could end up like New York and vote for an Eric Adams candidate. Remember, I kept saying an Eric Adams candidate. That's the guy who's the mayor of New York City, who's a piece of shit now. Well, people say he's been a piece of shit. But anywho, I feared that based on the current political climate, high crime, fear of crime, that a charismatic Black mayoral candidate could easily appeal to voters in a way that can win. And I said this at the very beginning, and I feared it, right? And then I started to see other candidates come, and I started to see different things. And I said to myself, well, maybe who's going to be that candidate? Because initially I was looking, and I thought maybe Amin Brown had the appeal, but he was super young and didn't have the experience. Cherelle Parker stood out to me as an Eric Adams type of candidate. Tough on crime, very much so with the status quo establishment base. Everything about her just spoke to that. She had the charisma. She had the story. She was Philly from the beginning to the end. She had that appeal, right? She's a mother. She's a Black woman. She's a single Black woman raising her child. She's from Philly. She's grown up here. She had that type of appeal that could easily attract people, even if they didn't agree with her policies. But she had that level of charisma that can mean something. So I thought to myself that that she kind of was giving me front runner energy. In the very beginning, it felt that way. And then it changed a little bit because with more candidates in the race and the way that, we were seeing how things are playing on social media and we were seeing how things are playing out in conversations in the press a little bit, it seemed like, there was some energy towards, a different candidate, like a Helen Gim. But then Rebecca really clearly showed that she was someone who could find that balance. And I felt like there was an opportunity in Philadelphia that, I was worried, like, because of how Kenny ran his race, could we go back to another black candidate, or we were going to go straight with white, types of progressive candidates, or at least, liberals. I don't think Rebecca is an extreme staunch progressive. She's more of a pragmatic progressive. But I thought that there could be something in the water that could shift. And polls kind of showed that a little bit. But things just seemed really interesting. And with Derek Green in a race and Maria, I thought that hurt Cherelle. But as we got closer and closer and the race began to evolve, it became clear that Cherelle was the sole black candidate in the race. Yes, there was James DeLeon. Yes, there was Ahmed Brown. And as we saw with the results, they got less than 1%. So a lot of this energy showed that it was going to even be harder for them to win, but also them to upset the race. So you had one sole black candidate as a front runner, 3 white candidates that were doing double digits, and then you had one Asian candidate. In a city that's majority black and brown, and that doesn't really include Asian in that conversation, Cherelle had an advantage, and she was a black woman. And there is an interest in, when we talk about look at the rise of black women candidates, there's been a lot to say. We have interesting types of people in the race that shaped how it went. And I was looking carefully at that. Like, when you think about it, right? Cherelle had previously been a state rep. She's paid her dues to the establishment. The establishment coalesced behind her after Derek Green and Maria left. When you look nationally, the types of black women who got elected were stronger, stauncher type moderates. You look at Keisha Lance Bottoms. You look at Lori Lightfoot. You look at some of these other black women who've been in elected seats. There was this narrative of progressive wave that Brandon was winning in Chicago. And so therefore, that was going to be Helen. But they forgot a big important detail. And this is why people need to pay attention carefully. If this was a runoff election, like Brandon had, because remember Paul from Philly, the white guy, when it was just a flat election with no runoffs, no ranked choice voting, the winner of that race was Paul. Because there was a runoff, Brandon had the advantage. Now, see, this is what I'm thinking strategically and personally. This is my idea. This is my thoughts. I could be completely, wrong or whatever the case is. But, I want to say that one of the things that people didn't pay attention to is that with this race between Cherelle, if there would have been a runoff race between Cherelle and Rebecca, I think Rebecca would have won. But unfortunately, in Philadelphia, we only have one election, one time, one vote, one opportunity, and the rest is history. So it is a changing game in politics. It is a change in politics. And I'm very much so observing these trends. I'm observing what has happened. And I think something that people are not paying attention to, it's a lot. It's a lot to see. And okay. It's a lot going on. I got a lot of text messages. I got a lot of stuff going on. People are messaging me. Everybody's like blowing my phone. Everybody's talking about what's the future, what's this, what's that. Listen, all I know is I'm going to be in the midst of this, okay? I'm excited that Kenny's no longer going to be mayor. I'm so happy that we're in a new era. This is going to be interesting to see what Cherelle do, but I want to explain back to my logistics. So we see this setup that in many ways, when you look back in retrospect, Cherelle was set up for success because there were so many factors that changed in the race. But I think what's really important is that, what I think the biggest problem of the election was, and I think people did not pay attention to, and I think, once again, it matters, right? Is that, here's the thing. It's the progressives' fault. I'm going to blame progressives. I'm going to blame progressives. Progressives, it's your fault. Is it my fault? No, because I'm a journalist. I did my thing. I covered the race. I explained my positions. It was what it was. The reality is that Helen Gim's camp, right, her supporters, really created such a very polarizing campaign, and I think that scared the establishment. It got super scary in the last 2 weeks. I think if the temperature would have, the rhetoric would have toned down a little bit, it wouldn't spark the fear. We're seeing heightened fear in certain parts of the city. And a lot of it is based on socialism, right? A lot of this communist rhetoric, a lot of this stuff. Helen brought a lot of national attention to the race and walked away with egg on her face. Egg on her face because of the fact that she ran a type of race that was super performative, super outlandish, and very polarizing. And it definitely was that kind of populist sentiment that wasn't popular. It was a type of race where, there were people who really went far, far, far left. And then someone like Rebecca Reinhart, who had a really more comprehensive agenda, who was very sincere, very honest, very, very likable, very practical, could not win. And the sad thing is that in any modern American city, if you would have had Cherelle run in Atlanta, Rebecca run in, Boston, both of these women would have won respectively. But in a city like Philadelphia with the polarizing politics the way they were, you was walking away thinking that Rebecca Reinhart was some Wall Street corporate Democrat who was just horrible, that was going to be in connection with Jeffrey Yass. And it was just like, that was never true. Congratulations. You played yourself because they went so extreme in these political binaries. And so the Helen Gim supporters, right, this small militia of Democratic socialists, these really far left people drank the Kool-Aid. And the problem with Helen is that Helen devolved, right? When Helen ran 4 years ago, Philadelphia was very different. 2019 was different. Helen played the game a lot better. Johnny Doc was in the fucking picture. She played the game. She was very fake, but she was fake enough to get the majority of votes and convince people that she was palpable. 4 years later, Helen deviates from her entire appeal. She goes completely far left. She is really, relying on some very strong third-party energy, working families parties, playing a heavy hand in her race. She's getting national outside support, national outside money. She just really steered away from the local. And she thought that the national was going to appeal. I keep telling people, what is interesting about Philadelphia is that Philadelphia is a city that loves itself. Philadelphia is a city that likes itself. If you want to break into Philadelphia, you have to love the city and its people, and the people have to like you. Listen, I am a national journalist, right? People know me across the country. I have a book deal that's national. I have all of these different things, but no one in Philadelphia cares about that shit, no more so than they care about the fact that I write for Philadelphia Magazine, that I'm on WRD Radio. I talk about it all the time. I have made TV appearances on CNN, MSNBC. People in Philadelphia don't really care about that shit. But if I'm on Fox 39 and an appearance with Alex Holly, I will have more people calling my phone that I was on with Mike Jerrick and Alex Holly than any CNN appearance I could ever have made. Because Philadelphia loves itself. This is a very hyper-local city. You have to have Philadelphia bona fide street cred. No one gives a fuck about where you've been, who you know, and all that other rah-rah. That's why a lot of people end up leaving Philadelphia from Philly, because if they don't love their city and the city doesn't love them back, they then fly off to LA and New York where they can reestablish themselves. To love Philly is to know Philly and to let Philly love you back. That is why I have succeeded in this city, because I have understood very early that if I wanted to thrive in this city, I had to learn the language, I had to learn the politics, I had to understand all of the different factors that was at play. And a lot of people don't understand that. My husband and I navigated this city. We both are not from here originally. He's closer than I am. He's from Jersey. But we navigate this city, understood that we had to be with its people. We had to understand the food. And we had to love these people and love this city as much as this city, we want the city to love us. And it worked. But you got to be down here. You got to be on the ground. And I think there's a lot of people that have gotten Philly adjacent. And I think the issue with Helen is that she's from Ohio, for what it's worth. She went to Penn. But when she came to Philly, she connected herself with certain pockets of people. But she really have always still aspired to be an outsider of this city, but still wanted to lead the city as an outsider. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way in Philadelphia. So it's something about the mayor's race, right? When you run for city council at large, nobody goes into your history. Nobody goes into your background. Nobody goes into all of the different things that shape you, right? They don't care. As long as you have a good message and you're positive and you got the right endorsements, is good. Helen made a lot of enemies. And the shit came back to bite her. It did. It did. She made enemies. She made a lot of enemies. Her campaign, her team, all of these people made enemies. And that did not help her. It didn't. That's just for starters. So I tell people that. But the real thing, though, was that there was, while the progressives were divided between clearly Rebecca or, Gim, the establishment got tight. The establishment took a bruising a year ago. Y'all remember when I covered the Fetterman race, and it was Fetterman versus Connor Lamb, and there was a lot of conversations about those races. You had Paul Prescott, you had going against Senator Anthony Williams, you had all of these divided races across the end, and these were tight races, and the establishment was getting some real heat. Okay, and I remember my story I did on Ryan Boyer, who is the big labor leader in Philly. Ryan Boyer, I did a profile on him, and that profile right now has been trending more than ever this past overnight, because people are starting to read and say, who the hell is, Ryan Boyer? Now, I've known Ryan Boyer for a while. I've talked about him, but people, ever since we saw the end, you know what I'm saying? Even with, everything that's happened, it's been very telling. How many people have ignored the role of labor and power, especially Black political power, since, Johnny Doc's absence. When Johnny Doc left, Ryan Boyer inherited a labor movement that was invested in pushing a Black figure. The Black Leadership PAC is a byproduct of Ryan Boyer's dream and vision to see political Black power return. And they pushed Cherelle Parker. This was a dream he had in his entire time. He talked about it in my piece for Philly Mag, that there was going to be an independent expenditure. He had all of this talk. This was a plan. He executed. He was speaking it. And I remember interviewing him being like, who are you supporting, Derek or Cherelle? And everything pointed to Cherelle. He set Cherelle up in position to get this seat. This reminds me of Doc and Kenny, Ryan and Cherelle. And when he lost, when he backed Connor, Labor took a hit when they backed Connor Lamb. There was an energy and a ferocity in Ryan Boyer that said, I can't lose again. I won't lose again. He learned, he licked his wounds. He got up and he established a base. He is a fierce man. He made those calls. He made those demands. He whipped those Black elected officials in position to back Cherelle. It was get down or lay down, and was very much assertive that Cherelle will be the next mayor. He was very confident about it. And I remember having many conversations with him, and we agreed to disagree respectfully. And I will say that that's something interesting about the other side of the moderate base of the Democratic Party, especially in Philadelphia, is that they can accept and tolerate differences of opinions without things going far polarizing. They can respect that you can coexist in their world if you can be respectful. And so as a journalist and as somebody who's in the community, I understood what Ryan's positions was. I had my concerns, but I was able to still break bread and set the table with this man. And I heard his vision and I heard his thoughts. And when I was looking at how they were coalescing behind Parker, the Progressive Party was falling apart. They were falling apart because they were on this end in this mind game of, we want to exclude Rebecca from the conversation. We're not going to acknowledge her as someone who's on our team that speaks our language as progressive. They abandoned her, even though they had supported her, when she ran in 2017 against Alan Bukovitz, when she ran for city controller, they loved her. They embraced her. But when she ran for mayor, it became a different type of campaign. It got ugly. And what was interesting about that situation was that there was a lot of betrayal. But what I've heard from close sources, that the agenda and the plan was always to get Helen to be mayor. That apparently from 2015, when she won, the plan was to get her to be mayor. And when she became the highest vote getter, the plan was she must be next to run for mayor. But the interesting thing is that you can't ignore the change of history. That in between the time of 2019 when she won and 2023, several things happened. We had a pandemic. We had a huge spike in crime. We had a city that lost Johnny Dock, which was one of her big funders. The establishment and all of its hypocrisies began to implode. We also saw a rise in interest in Black women in power. The first Black vice president gets elected. We see a rise of Black leaders across cities. There were a lot of political changes that was happening. And yes, there was a progressive movement that also included the likes of Larry Krasner, but there was something happening in that 4 years that Helen was not paying attention to, and neither was her progressive friends. They were just invested in electing her in spite of every warning sign that said this was not it. And so when she decides to be the candidate, she, doesn't really change. She tries initially to speak on public safety, but her history and her track record just was not matching up. I've always said this. She should have ran for Congress. And maybe she might still run for Congress. I said this in a theory, but I do have this slight conspiracy theory that part of me feels like Helen sensed that she wasn't going to win maybe a couple of weeks ago. And I feel as though she decided to deviate her campaign into a national one to line her up and set her up to run for Congress. And I think she believes that in that type of race, if she takes on the likes of Dwight Evans, who just turned 69 on election day, primary day, he just turned 69 years old. He's already served, 2 or 3 terms. It could make sense to say, well, maybe we've given Dwight several terms now. Maybe it's time to consider someone else. I could see Helen running against him. I don't think she's going to run against Brendan Boyle, but I could see Helen having enough support that she can make a real dent in a congressional race. But it became clear to me in my mind that she pivoted off of the way she was running. And it looked like more and more the way that she was bringing out rock stars like AOC and Bernie Sanders, and the way that she was getting CNN stories and New Yorker stories, that there was this narrative. But I hated the national stories. And I keep telling you fucking national folks that love to keep talking about what's happening locally. Let me remind you that I wrote a piece about Eric Adams for the Daily Beast, about why Eric Adams won. And it's almost identical to how Helen Gim lost. That Democrats, all of that, like Cherelle's epic win is a big deal. And we need to stop spending all this time trying to duke it out and have all these different talks. At the end of the day, we see where it's happening. There was a census. There was a fear. And I also think that something told me a lot. And there was a lot. There was a lot that happened that night at the elections. And I think there's a lot that we still are trying to, unravel. But one of the things that stood out to me the most about this entire situation is that the way that Gim started to run her campaign at the end scared the living daylights out of voters. And I think that the voters who maybe would have considered Helen or Rebecca ran to Cherelle because there was a sense that the Bernie bros and all these people that there was going to be increased lawlessness, and they drank that Kool-Aid. And I think they got really, really scared, and they just went completely to the moderate side. They didn't even give any ear to Rebecca. And of course, Dom's presence in the race did eat up at Rebecca. I think if Dom was out the race, I think those votes would have run to Rebecca. I think if Jeff Brown would have got out the race, I think Cherelle would have had some leeway too, but it would have been more of a different type of race. But I definitely think Dom ate up those votes. I think Dom was the voting base that ate from Rebecca. Rebecca could have won if she had Dom's votes. I believe that. I don't think Dom's votes was ever going to go to Helen, but it's obvious that they would have gone to Rebecca for sure. And I think I think Rebecca ate more and more off of Dom's plate, but there was still this wall there. I don't see Dom supporters going to Cherelle. I don't see that, but I think it would have been Rebecca potentially. But again, at the end of the day, Cherelle won. And Cherelle won because Cherelle's team, the establishment, essentially got together, coalesced behind her, and pushed her through. While progressives were arguing day after day about Rebecca and ignoring Cherelle in those conversations, and I was one of those people. I'm guilty as charged. I did, in many ways, count Cherelle out because I thought that there was going to be enough vote. But that Northwest coalition had a rebirth. And I think part of why the Northwest had a rebirth is not so much because of Cherelle, but because there was so much smoke in the Northwest. Look at that race between Cindy Bass and Seth. It's neck and neck. You know what I'm saying? It's neck and neck. We wait in every second of the hour to see how those numbers are going to come in. But it's very telling, right? It's very telling what we're seeing, what we're witnessing. And it's clear that even Rebecca and Helen being so close to each other shows the gap. I mean, Cherelle got a third of the vote. A third. That's not a strong consensus, but in a race this crowded, it was a very deafening sign. And the fact that Rebecca and Helen were neck and neck shows that their supporters were split. And if Helen would have just got out the race, Rebecca would have won. And it looks like if Dom would have got the race and all those votes went to Rebecca, she would have been tied. But it seems like Helen is the one who caused the split. They cancel each other out. People really not believe that voters were that split between them. So really, it made sense. It was a split. It was a cut between them. And it's looking more and more like Jimmy Harity is going to be safe. Rue Landau, Nina Ahmad, but Rue was definitely guaranteed a lock-in. But these races, when you look across the board, it's interesting. Cindy Bass's race is interesting. When you look at the ballot questions, people said yes to the Rainy Day Fund. People said yes to the Division of Workforce. It's split on the oversight, but it's looking more like yes for that. When you look at the ballot on a creative public safety director job, it's a majority of yes on that. It seems like all of them said yes to the ballot questions, and that's probably because a lot of people didn't understand what the ballot questions were giving. It seems like the race between Rochelle Bilal and Michael Unsermeyer is close. That Jackie Miles thing in the race hurt. If Jackie Miles would got the race, Rochelle could have probably lost sheriff. Looks like it's still hard to call, but it looks like it's getting closer and closer to Rochelle. There's other races going on. Looks like John Sabatina is only up by a point. Tracy Gordon is trying to hold on. But there's other people running in the race, so that makes that harder. But there's a lot of races that's going on that's sparking interest. I've been just keeping my eyes on all these poll races left and right. The Cindy Bass race is a nail biter. They're close, but it looks like Cindy Bass is gonna pull it out, even though the race is super, super close. It's razor thin, but it's about 1,000 votes in between. But it's a tough ass race. It's too hard to call. It's at 87% of the votes over there. So people are still, trying to figure out where that is headed. But again, these races are no joke. These races are no joke across the board. But back to the mayor's race. while progressives were divided, the Republicans, the establishment, the establishment was able to coalesce. And I say this to be clear, that Philadelphia was not Chicago. Again, people kept making these correlations. These national reporters were really writing about Helen like she's this glowing star. And to the comms teams, right? Let me tell you about those comms teams. Maggie Hart, I gotta call names now. Maggie Hart and Brennan, the campaign manager, you all blew it. You blew it. Brennan was the campaign manager for last year for John Fetterman. Brennan should have known better. He knows how this game is played. I don't know why he did what he did. Maggie Hart was just a terrible communications director. The way that she came at journalists, the way that she came at black journalists specifically, the way that she came at the local press, and the way that she finessed the national press because she knew the local press wasn't eating the bullshit. The way that they really tried to create the local media as some massive conspiracy against Helen was just intellectually dishonest and unfair. But there was a lot of that going on. And a lot of people was not paying attention to the optics of how that was taking shape. It was a lot. It was a lot. And it was very frustrating to see how people was turning against each other. I mean, I was someone who at one moment everyone looked to and liked and was like, oh, wow, Ernest is a great candidate, blah, 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 blah. Well, not candidate, but someone who covered the media, right? People really appreciated that. But then, it was real. It was real. And there are lessons to be learned from all of this. And I'm just disappointed with the way that progressives carried this election and how they acted. And I want to take a moment to talk about some of that stuff. Progressives out there, y'all, community, we got to amplify black progressive voices. Enough. It's black people's time. The establishment has done a better job embracing black candidates on their side than the progressive movement has. Okay, I'm calling out names, okay? Like, you all keep pushing Amanda Malcolm-Marie's, right? You all keep trying to push Sherry Cohen's, right? It's time to push black progressive candidates like Isaiah Thomas. There's a young man who I'm really cool with named Andre Carroll, right? This brother ran last cycle against Stephen Kinsey in his district. He's black, he was queer, he has political experience, he's worked on various offices. This man was close to defeating Stephen Kinsey, an incumbent Democrat in the state house last year. You did not give him energy because he was too busy running, all types of other candidates that were not familiar with the districts and the areas in which they were from, right? It's time to drop all of the optics and identity politics. You gotta push people who know what the fuck they're doing. You can't just pick random candidates out of the wood and then say, okay, y'all, we're gonna run this in the neighborhood. Y'all gotta diversify your canvassers, okay? And stop with the polarizing far end. The reclaim people, it needs to be some reformation, right? People are sick of reclaim. I'm gonna call a thing a thing. People are low-key sick of reclaim. Not even low-key anymore, high-key. They're sick of this very snobby, stuffy, fake, woke type of group of people that are walking around on some moral platitude, acting like, you're not this, you're not that. People are sick of that shit. We are in the fucking fight of our lives. You need to be putting up candidates that reflect the communities they come from and actually can be a little bit more practical and reasonable. Okay, pushing all of these extreme candidates that are literally not attached to these issues, that can't have a seat at the table. Look, I'm not trying to run for office, but if I did, I would whoop so many of your candidates' ass, it's not even fucking funny. And it's not because I'm a shrill for the establishment, it's because at the end of the day, people want real people. And you all sit up here and create these ridiculous ass political binaries that even your candidates cannot adjust to. You all have made it a shame for people to make money. You have shamed people for being educated. You have shamed people for having any aspirations. You can't talk to black voters like that. Black voters in this country are still more patriotic than they should be personally, but they are. They are more likely to aspire to those aspirations of American capitalism that maybe I feel like it's way too much, but they are still aspirational people. And if you're coming in there with a doom and gloom or some communist type messaging, you're going to lose them. And I don't think that you can lose them all the way. I think that it's the way that you talk about these issues. You have to use words that they get. You can't be walking around just saying abolish the police. No one's going to vote for you that way, right? But what if you said we need to reconsider and discuss how we budget the police department? That's a different way of presenting it. But if you come in there, abolish the police, abolish this, you're not going to win. And no one's saying that you can't have that mindset, but the way that you talk about it to people, you have to change your appeal and your approach. Congratulations. You won the social media polls. You won Twitter. But guess what? You're in a fucking poor ass city where most people do not have access to Wi-Fi. There's a major digital divide in Philadelphia, and you're ignoring all of this poverty to try to act like this is fucking Los Angeles or you're in some Silicon Valley type of city. Act your wage. Like running a Swifties for GIM. Like, you wasted money to do that. You should have put money in the ground game. And you should have put money in the local ground game. Busing people from New York City? Mark Ruffalo endorsements? Are you kidding me? Like, Jane Fonda endorsements? Like, what? And then you go to the extreme far left of people, right? You got Mark Lamont Hill and Michael Cord. You think, with all due respect, you think that they represent the politics of most Black Philadelphians? They don't. Like, you really do not think about all of this. And all of the people that could have been allies on your team, that could have supported you, you all treated like shit because you wanted outright, unapologetic support. What's interesting about Cherelle Parker, and I have to give her credit for this, is that Cherelle never played nasty with me. She knew that I wasn't the biggest fan of her. I mean, for some of her policies, stop and frisk, all that is just, ugh. But her team never made personal attacks. They never came for me. They never came for the press. And what's interesting is that Cherelle never had any attack ads. No attack ads. No attack ads. People sleep on that detail. And I think that says something. No one wanted to do it because of the optics. No one wanted to do it because of the optics. And I think that may explain why this happened the way it did. She didn't get one single attack ad. And that says a lot. So, there's so much. You know, there's so much. There's so much. So what next? You know, what do we say? How do we make this make sense? I think what is real and what's next. I think what's next is that people need to, for starters, it's going to be interesting what Mayor Parker is going to do under a Parker administration. It's going to be interesting to see it. You know, the stop and frisk is going to be a concern. A new city council. I mean, city council seems like it's going to be pretty much the radical city council we thought we was going to have. Doesn't seem like it's going to be the case. We're going to have a pretty similar city council we currently have. There are going to be a couple of new faces and figures, but not enough that I think will rock the boat. I do think that the 76ers arena, now that we know what we know, I do think that might happen. The likelihood of it happening is even higher under Cherelle Parker. I mean, Cherelle Parker, her relationship with Boyer is going to really, I think, change so much. So it is important to note that Cherelle had a recent dental issue that needed immediate medical attention, and that is why she is not. She had an emergency. That's why she wasn't at her party, um, and so that's partially why she didn't show. She had a dental emergency apparently, so she had to go straight to the University of Pennsylvania to get that taken care of, because a lot of people were trying to figure out what was going on. Like, where is Cherelle? What's going on? And so it seems like she has a dental situation. So, because it's kind of mysterious. Like, this is supposed to be her night. And I'm like, dang, what happened? Where is she? It happened. Um, so it is interesting to see all the stuff that's played out. Um, but we there's a lot going on. There's a lot going on. Um, but yeah. All right. So it's late. There'll be more to talk about. I just want to get off my chest that the moral of the story is listen to Black people that have different opinions than you. Listen to Black people. Listen to Black people. Listen to people who have different opinions. Listen to people who have come from different walks of life. Um, Politics is local. Local politics are local. You can't stunt your way to the top. You can't cheat your way to the top. You can't fake your way to the top. It is what it is. And at the end of the day, we're going to see what's going to happen. I mean, Cherelle's got some heavy shoes to fill. There's going to be some real serious conversation that need to be had. We're going to see how this play out. But Philadelphia is in a very interesting. There's going to be a difference in Philadelphia. And the cool thing is that I'm going to be able to cover Philadelphia. I'm going to cover the new city council. I'm going to have fun doing all of this work. And the journey continues. I'm excited. I'm excited about what's on the horizon. I'm excited about who I'm going to see in these different positions. The city is going to be on fire, in a radical way. I think not fire like metaphorical fire, but it's metaphorical fire, not literal fire. But like it's going to be an interesting time. A woman mayor in Philadelphia. A 100th mayor was a Black woman. It's symbolic, but there are concerns, legitimate concerns, like. Is this, what will the policies look like? Is she going to, she's, the cops love her clearly. It's just going to be interesting to see what happens in this administration. I'm just, mm, 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 mm. People are concerned. Ooh. So much. So much. There's so much. mm, 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 mm. So much. I just it's a lot. So stay woke. Stay woke. Stay woke. Stay thoughtful. Stay. It's a lot of thoughts about what happened, and Rebecca Reinhardt has officially conceded. She says we will keep fighting for Philadelphia. They had their event at Craft Hall. I wasn't there. I spent the evening at Katherine Grimmer Richardson's party, which I had a delicious dinner. I stayed there, and it was a night. So Katherine Grimmer Richardson won, Isaiah Thomas won, Rulandar won. Looked like Nina Ahmad is finally going to win an elected seat in City Council. And it looks like Jimmy Harity might edge it out. Aaron Sansamora losing. Ooh. Again, close but not close enough, it seems like. What a tough one. What a tough one. But it's a lot going on. But there'll be more to talk about this week. More conversations, more shockers. What else is going to play out? But what I will say is that this is all I got on my mind tonight. This is what I could come up with in my head. The results are going to reveal more things. But as always, be well and be best. Ernestly Speaking is recorded in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and can be found on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. To stay up to date with the latest on the show, follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Mr. Ernest Owens. Use the hashtag Ernestly Speaking to tell me what you thought about this episode, and check out my website at ernestowens.com.